This anime is brutal. This is not for the squeamish or the faint of heart. Absolutely not. If you've ever suffered domestic abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, bullying, any of those things, I would not recommend that you watch this one. Or if you're easily triggered by any and all of those things, you might want to skip out in this one. It's brutal. But even with all the decapitations and people losing limbs and just all this other stuff going on, from psychological trauma, neglect, emotional abuse, animal abuse, there still is a story to this anime. And is it worth a watch? Yes, indeed it is. Do I like a lot of these things? No, I absolutely don't. But at the same time, there is a story to this anime. It's a very, very tragic and sad one. But at the same time, is it one that's worth watching? I believe that it is. Let's see, what other kinds of sins can we throw into this one? How about cousin love? Let's throw that in there too, just because it's... Huh? What's up, everybody? My name is DangerDoug. Thank you so much for watching this episode. We are going to be covering Elfen Lied, and this one was recommended to us by Awesome Catty K. Courtney. This one's for you. She recommended this one a long time ago, and I've been putting off watching it for the longest time here and there too. But now's the time. Now's the time, people, to get through this gory, bloody mess. Oh my god, let's freaking do this. Elfen Lied is a 13-episode dark fantasy horror sci-fi anime written by Lin Akimoto of the manga series, based off the same name. This anime made its debut by ARMS production company in Japan around 2004, and again, it's a little bit more of an older anime compared to a lot of the ones that you might be used to on this channel, but it didn't make its way into the United States and Canada until about 2007. The weird thing about this anime is that there isn't too many other ones out there that are like it. It's kind of one of a kind, and it has its own crazy, brutal story. The very violent nature of this anime is just kind of over the top at first, but I find that a lot of people, if they can make it through the first episode, you're typically pretty good at that point because you kind of know what to expect, but a lot of people either stop watching after the first episode and are like, okay, this is definitely not my cup of tea, or there's just some things in it that kind of would make you kind of squirm a little bit. But regardless, even though the story is a tragedy, it actually is a pretty good one, and for a lot of intents and purposes, with a lot of the anime that have come out around the same time frame, like in the mid-2000s, it actually is pretty good. So let's get you guys introduced to our main cast of characters with this one. Lucy / New is one of the most tragic characters that I've ever seen in an anime before. Lucy is what this show calls a Diclonius. Now, for all of you guys out there defining Diclonius over here, it's basically evolved form of human here and there that started popping up in Japan here and there too, from a couple of different families that started to notice that there was a little bit of an evolution happening in humanity. Now, there's a couple of differences here and there with the new evolution of humanity here and there, in that it's distinguished by two horns that stick up from the head over here on the two sides of the temple, and they also have these protrusions here and there that are invisible to the human eye, called vectors. Vectors are invisible arms that can absolutely tear things to shreds and cause a whole bunch of gory mayhem, but they can also be used for other applications too, like pushing things here and there, or lifting keys, or whatever, what have you. But the point is that they do have telepathic powers. And because humanity has experienced this little evolutionary type of thing here and there, when a lot of these teenagers start to go through adolescence, it's normally when they pick up their powers because, well, anime. The Diclonians start to take very violent tendencies because they're seen as very different in society. A lot of people shun them, a lot of people bully them, and they're seen as outsiders because of their powers. And also the horns sticking up out of their head, which kind of ironically look like cat ears, in a way. Huh. Lucy is ultra powerful and probably one of the only Diclonius who can actually replicate herself, if you will, or reproduce here and there by basically taking human beings, changing a little bit of their genetic code, and producing other Diclonius when they start to have children. She's captured by some secret government, I don't know what organization, and held in captivity, and we see her daring escape in the first episode, and it's a very bloody mess. Even though she escapes, she is sniped down and thrown into the sea here and there by the bullets, and surfaces on the beach the very next day. The organization loses her, but she's found by 2 other characters that just happen upon her over the beach. But she's not quite the same. Despite her starting violent nature in the very beginning as a Declonius who's just basically on a rampage here and there with a vendetta against humanity for keeping her in captivity and bullying the crap out of her, she develops this split personality called Neo, who's pink-haired, cute, kind of childlike, and among other things, and yeah, fun. We find out that this character, Neo, is essentially kind of her innocent side here and there too, once she's hit by that sniper bullet, and develops this split personality here and there too, but occasionally, when she's hit in the head here and there too, she'll revert back to her Lucy, brutal, violent self, and go on a rampage to deal with whatever problem might be coming up her way. So if assassins are coming out to kill her, or if it's another Declonius that comes out to try to take care of the problem, she, in some ways, is able to kind of revert back to her violent self, deal with the problem, and then a lot of cases she's hit in the head again, and then reverts back to Neo, her cute, sweet, and innocent self. Only an anime, guys. Our next main character is Kota. Now, Kota is a returning university student who takes up boarding with the other main character, Yuka, who's his cousin. They're taking up residence in Yuka's parents' house, I believe, which has been left in her keeping, at least for the time being. The 2 of them discover Lucy at the beach, where she's just kind of wandering around, kind of coming to her senses after being shot, and they see that she's in staunch distress, and they decide to take her in. Kota also has a dark past too. His sister is dead, his father is dead, and he basically doesn't have any family aside from his cousin Yuka left in the world. He takes in Lucy along with his cousin Yuka, and they kind of take care of her, at least at first, but then they start to discover that there's a little bit more to her than they originally thought. Although one side note about Yuta actually over here, I did want to mention that this one was kind of fun, at least for me at least, but it kind of goes into that old anime trope here and there about the generic looking male character protagonist who's just kind of over there, and every single one of the women that comes into contact with him during the show falls for him in some kind of way, shape, or fashion just because he's the one guy who, at least in this instance, doesn't have any other male friends around. Anime? Really? But yes, he's our lone kind of male protagonist guy who's just kind of there, and all the women kind of like him here and there because he's cute and good-natured and has a tragic backstory, and who knew? Sorry, had to throw this little bit about him, but it's kind of funny and ironic at the same time. It's a tragic anime, you gotta let me throw some humor into it every once in a while to kind of ease the blow for this one. And then, of course, we get into one of our next main characters, Yuka, who, yes, is Kota's cousin. And even to add more sins onto this anime, she's his cousin who likes him, has a crush on him, kind of. Yuka is very good-natured, I will give her that. I mean, she is very sweet and innocent, and she definitely takes care of things at home, and she definitely is kind of like that one character, that stabilizer in the entire household that just kind of, when everybody else seems to be going through this mass chaos of amnesia and trying to recall a lot of their past here and there and trying to learn a little bit more about each other, with Lucy trying to pick up a lot of bits of her past here and there, or Kota trying to remember a lot of what was happening in his tragic backstory. She's kind of that stabilizer of the group that's just kind of one of the only normal characters of the show. Our last main character is Kurama, who's the chief scientist over at the top secret scientific research facility that's keeping every single one of the Declonius at this facility and doing wild experimentation on them. He's dealing with his own tragic backstory in that he actually happened upon Lucy way back when, and she had changed something about him. One of her vectors got to him, and when he tried to have a baby with his wife, the baby turned out to be a Declonius. Because he ran into Lucy a long time ago, he fathered a Declonius because she changed his genetic code. He devoted his life to making sure that he can eradicate them from the rest of humanity. But his methods are absolutely terrifying. He does brutal experimentations, he does tortures in order to make sure that he can find out a little bit more about how these things work here and there too with the vectors, and then how far each one can brutally take any sort of punishment. It gets into a very weird debate here and there about how far experimentation should go for superhumans, subhumans, and anything else too. But we see that this man is a guy who's devoted to trying to make sure that he can secure a place for humanity in the future. With the culmination of all these characters in the mix, every single one of them is given a little bit of the spotlight throughout the plot, which we'll now get into right now. The plot is mainly centered around Lucy, who's our main Diclonius, who's the only one that we know of that can reproduce. And the way that she reproduces is by going in with one of her invisible hand vectors into the rest of humanity, and instead of tearing them to shreds like she still can do, she changes a little bit of their genetic code. So essentially when they go to reproduce or make children of their own, they give birth to other Diclonius too. And because these children are born with a very violent nature here and there too, and the ability and opportunity to rip humanity to shreds whenever they get very upset with any of them, they are shunned very much. And whenever the secret organization that's behind all the scenes finds out that there is a Diclonius that pops up in humanity, they capture them, detain them, and torture the shit out of them. They do this to try to figure out exactly what's going on with all of them. And yes, first episode, we see Lucy's daring escape. And again, as she's picked up with Kota and Yuka at the beach, we see that the secret organization sends a couple of agents to try to detain her and bring her back. So dispatch Bando, Nana, and finally Mariko here and there to try to detain Lucy and bring her back to the organization. While all that's going on, we find out a little bit more of the backstory behind all these characters. We see that growing up, Lucy has had this whole tragic backstory here and there where she was bullied as a little girl and tortured by these little kids here and there just because she was different. We see the torture from these bullies take an even more unprecedented level when they brutally torture and kill one of her friends, a little dog. She brutally murders every single one of the bullies who had ever made fun of her and just basically vows to take out humanity. That's when she meets Kota. Kota's just this little boy who just befriends her right after she is at her lowest point, and he takes her out to the zoo and just has a great day with her. He doesn't treat her any differently than any other normal human being, which is something that Lucy has ever wanted, like ever since she was born. Her parents had shunned her way, her friends had shunned her way, and she has killed them all, but this one person has given her just a little ounce of humanity to cling to. But when she's captured by the top secret organization and finally, escapes, she happens upon Kota and his cousin Yuka as well. They develop this friendship as their memories start to return back from each other, and even though the trope of amnesia in anime here and there is a very prevalent one, especially also in JRPGs, they start to develop their friendship and kind of realize a lot of the memories that start flooding back. And as a lot of these memories start flooding back for a lot of the characters, we see that a lot of the realizations come into play that, again, they just wanted to cling to some ounce of humanity. And that's the big tragedy with this whole thing, is them trying to be accepted. And even though I don't want to spoil the ending for you guys here and there too, the ending is up for debate with a lot of people as to exactly how things played out in the very end here and there too. It does have a final ending here and there too, and a big standoff, which culminates in a crazy experience, which is very satisfying too. But it's crazy. And even with all the anime tropes in this show here and there too, about characters with tragic backstories, the male character with all of the female interests around him, and the childhood friends, it still is a very satisfying experience and very much well worth the watch. But make no mistake, again, this one's brutal, guys. Not for the faint of heart. So really quick, let's talk about the production quality and soundtrack of this anime. At the time that this was released back in the mid-2000s, the production value is pretty good for the most part. Although a lot of the home scenes here and there too, where they're just kind of home doing a couple of things, where Lucy might be trying to fix a clock here and there in her new state, or they might be making dinner or something. A lot of those art styles are kind of fairly similar to most anime that you might be familiar with from that era here and there too. But where it does particularly shine is when the vectors with the 3D animations and all of the brutal murdering scenes here and there come into play. Now, I know I smile at this here and there too because I do like a little bit of gore here and there in my anime, but at the same time, where it does shine was with a lot of the animation with that especially. And even though a lot of the murder and decapitation scenes are still quite good and drawn very well, it can be much for a lot of people. But the one area that this anime really does get right is in its soundtrack, and especially so in its opening track. The opening track, Lilium, is an absolute treasure, and it's also, because it's such a treasure, used in a variety of different ways here and there, just in different kinds of formats, from like music box to like different piano compositions throughout the anime. But it does get repetitive every once in a while, but if you were to watch the opening sequence like in full, it is a really good experience. It's dark, it's mysterious, it perfectly sets the tone for this anime, and when used in combination with the art style of Gustav Klimt's The Kiss here and there, in combination with showing the drawings of Lucy here and there from the opening sequence, it's a great opening sequence. Okay, I'm using great to describe it, but it actually is pretty masterful. Definitely will give it props for that one. The ending sequence is in sharp contrast here and there to the opening sequence, in that instead of it being Gregorian chants and Renaissance contributions and operatic, epic proportions with symphonies, it's more like a pop rock song. You kind of would expect this to be on like an Avril Lavigne cover or something like that, or maybe something from the mid-2000s era. Although the true value here and there of the ending song, with it being very pop punk, with it being, oh hey, I want to be your girl, it takes the tension down, which it really should. And now let's talk about my conclusion. With the tragic backstory with this anime and everything that kind of comes to a resolution here and there, from childhood friends getting back together again and discovering that they just wanted to be loved in the first place and accepted, but even though there's a humanity that won't accept them, it still is a very good experience for a lot of peoples, and once you get past a lot of the brutal nature of it, it actually is a really good anime. The reason why I'm trying to convince you that it's worth a watch is because there is a really good story to it. It's not a story that you haven't seen before in a couple of JRPGs, but it is a really good one. And because I really think that it is definitely worth a watch, I award this anime with a 3.5 out of 5, recommending that you do see it, but maybe not buy it for your collection. So instead of buying it right off the bat and spending the however many dollars it takes to buy it, I would actually recommend that you stream it on Hulu instead, and then decide whether or not you want to buy it for your collection. Although a 3.5 may seem a little bit bad here and there too, I did really enjoy this anime. I love the characters in there, and even though a lot of this stuff may seem like a big bloody mess here and there too, I did really enjoy this experience. But for a lot of you guys at home, I know that this may be kind of crazy to watch here and there too, and I know that a lot of people might be turned off. If you can again make it through the first episode, you should be fine to go through this experience. Now, I will be talking about this anime on my Twitch channel on Sunday, April 5th at about 9 p.m. US Eastern Standard Time for a lot of you guys who want to join in on the conversation. But with this one, yes, again, if you're going to watch it beforehand, I know it's only 13 episodes and you might even be able to get it done in like a weekend or something. It is very, very hard to watch. But I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation over here today with this review. Don't forget to check out a couple of our other anime reviews, and also don't forget to leave me a like and a comment down below and subscribe to the channel for more anime content. And with that, I bid you guys adieu, and I will see you soon in the next video. Cheers guys, bye bye.